Okay, so I'm just going to live video. Camera, HP webcam, allow. That's terrible. Okay, no, I'll do something else. I'll try this one then. Okay. You're going to fall off. It's not good. Okay, it's not too bad. So see the screen. Go live. Where's my mouse? Okay. Hello, my name is Deborah Rodriguez, and I'm here for the open meeting for the Post-Partum and Caring Professionals Group. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what it's been designed for and the people who are involved and our future plans. For those of you who are listening over the internet, I'd like to thank you for joining us. We do have Katie Nikolai who is taking notes for us today. We've had requests from people whose English is their second, third, or fourth language, and they find it hard to follow a verbal report, as well as from people who have special needs, and it's much easier for them to access print. I'm here from Cologne today. Oh, are you kidding me? It's paused. Anyhow, I'm going to continue. We have the oral, which will be also available through Google Drive later. I won't wait for Facebook for too long.
Is it recording?
It was. Now my live video has ended, and I don't know why. Hold on. Let me just see what on earth is happening here. So the Post-Partum and Caring Professionals Group was something that I created in 2015. The reason that I created it is because when I first started baby wearing in Canada, which is my business back home in 2009, my long-term intention was to create a series of groups across the country. But like a lot of us, when our children are young, we aren't as focused. And so with the onset of my divorce, I had to make a firm commitment if I was really going to follow through. So November 2014, I incorporated baby wearing in Canada. And along with the incorporation of baby wearing in Canada, I also started looking into incorporating a secondary level. For me, I feel that a certification is an important role and an important step towards professionalization. I don't want to be the one to do a final evaluation of my students. For starters, like all of us, we have favorites. And we do give preferential treatment even if we don't mean to. And secondly, I wanted to also bring it to a higher level where you would have the training combined with the number of hours in order to be able to apply for the test. And so looking into this, then that's when I decided to establish the Post-Partum and Caring Professionals Group. One of the important things with the PPCP, and as you can see here on the poster, are the 3 values that I have determined, and they are going to be the cornerstone of the first conference that we will be holding next year, November 2nd and 3rd in Barcelona, Spain, in partnership with Rosa Sorribas from Criança Natural. The first one is integrity. Integrity is one of the most important things when you are establishing a profession, but also when you are working with others. You have to have a trust in the people that you are working with. And that doesn't mean that you can't have various linkages here and there, but you have to be above board with them. You have to be transparent. And you also need to ask people to adhere to a very strict code of ethics to guide their behavior. And also, when you have a code of ethics, then you're telling people what their expectations are. And that's how you create a dynamic of trust, is you establish expectations, people come to you, and then you reflect back to them. This also enables you to do a better job of connecting with people in other professions. So the second aspect of this is professionalism. Now, all of us here are involved in education. The first step when we're talking about professionalization is training. It's just flat out training. But what kind of training? And who determines what aspects are to be included in a training program? And what is the test of the training program? Where do you go from there? And so professionalization to me is something that is consistent, where you're using the best evidence. And as we know, in carrying, there isn't a lot of evidence. And that's kind of like a chicken and egg thing. We want to have professionalization, we want to have science, but science won't take a look at you unless you have a consistent, reliable training program. I just went to the International Lactation Consultants Association conference this past July, and over again, even when we're talking about lactation support in hospitals, there was a presentation I went to, I believe it was talking about the peer support model in Brighton, England, and one of the things over and over again was the volunteers got the same training. The volunteers themselves weren't IBCLCs. They were being trained by IBCLCs who had the higher level. They were being supported by IBCLCs, but that enabled them to work consistently from the same set of information so that you're not confusing parents along the way. And that is a very important aspect, I feel, about professionalism, is to be reliable and to know what the expectations are. And it's not just what people think as a, we must dress properly and sound right and keep our movements a particular way. It starts right from the very beginning. Your integrity, your code of ethics, your conflict of interest, and then your consistent training program. For me, a consistent training program is a number of hours and it's interdisciplinary. And it requires a certain amount of practicum hours and then an independent test. Quite simply, an independent test. And then finally, it's connection. One of the things that people mention over and over and over and over again is, I went to the doctor, I went to this professional, I went to this person, and they were so stuck on their script, and they were so cold, and they didn't hear me. And when we're talking about carrying an infant, the most important part of that is the connection between the mother and the father and the child to the family, and the parent and the child to its community. And so, as professionals, we not only have to have the information and the backing and the science in order to create and establish the foundation of professionalism, but we also need to look at other factors. I find too often in our space, partially because we came out of attachment parenting, which is a parenting philosophy. It is not attachment psychology. It is not perinatal support. It is completely different. It comes from a very particular time and from a very particular culture, which happens to be white Anglo-Saxon Protestant American. That is my opinion. It wasn't a model that was suitable for me. I don't know if you're aware, but I am a dual citizen. I was born in Portuguese Africa, and so then we immigrated to Canada and I was a young child. I have two cultures. And one of them has a set of requirements and the other one has a different set of requirements, and they're completely different. It makes you very aware of the different elements that pervade your entire life. So in connection is something that we must remember. So every person who gets trained should know what's a healthcare system like. What are the access points for support? When somebody comes in and we have to look at their situation, are we evaluating them and saying, well, it's the baby carrier at fault? Or are we actually saying, hold on a minute, how about let's talk about you? Let's do some perinatal support. Maybe you're just feeling really uncomfortable and you're getting a lot of judgment from your family. You don't know where to go in your maternity or parental leave, because all of our countries have different leave requirements, and let's see where we can help you. I find in over 50% of the cases, at least personally for myself, that it's not the baby carrier that is necessarily the problem. It's a confidence issue above all else, because unless we get into very particular situations of special needs, at which point we do need to look more closely at equipment and ergonomics and physiology and kind of break all the rules, that's a really important part of it. And I'm just going to try and see if I can't get Facebook Live to run for the next segment, which is my personal history and a bit about my biography.
Right, I was asking you your broadcasting.
Yes. If someone can answer them.
I just told her.
Yes. I'm trying. I'm recording. Please tell me you're still recording. Yes, I'm still recording. Okay, so we're going to go live again. I always laugh. I'm going into my third conference with Baby Wearing in Canada. I know you've done several conferences yourself, and whenever you're like, everything's going to go perfectly, you're like, yeah, right. There's always like a million things that happen at the last minute. Hi, everyone who is joining us online. I'd like to apologize. The Facebook feed didn't work right away. I am making an audio recording, which will be available through Google Drive later on. So we've talked about the values of the PPCP to this point, which is integrity, professionalism, connection. And now I'm going to go into my own personal biography and my history. As I mentioned, my name is Deborah Rodriguez. I am a dual Canadian-Portuguese citizen. I immigrated to Canada. I was a year old, and I was introduced to baby wearing as a mother like most of us. My first child was born in 2004, and my second child was born in 2007. And anyone who's been around that long, the amount that the industry changed from 2004 to 2007 was phenomenal. I went from being able to access like 4 or 5 carriers to, with the second one, one of the reasons I stepped into this industry is because I got on the internet, and then suddenly I had 50 baby carriers in my basement, and I decided maybe I should do something. So I started initially as a one-on-one consultant with Crown of Dreams, August 2008, and in January 2009, I started Baby Wearing in Canada, and I started offering free postpartum support groups centered around baby carrying. I've always had the long-term intention to establish a training program, and in 2014, I took that step. I incorporated Baby Wearing in Canada. I then started looking into incorporating and creating a secondary certification entity. With regards to certification, I was first brought into this sort of conversation as part of the Baby Carrier Industry Alliance. The Baby Carrier Industry Alliance, April 2012, held a series of educator talks over the phone. There was a number of us present on my phone call. There was Jan Andrea from Sleeping Baby Productions, there was Ari, there was Joanna McNeely, there was Vesta, there was, I believe, Rachel Ullman. It was a whole bunch of us. This subsequently led to a secondary meeting at the 2012 International Baby Wearing Conference in Washington, D.C., We were supposed to have a more in-depth discussion at this meeting. Anyone who was in attendance at this meeting knows that it was poorly organized. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and we weren't really able to get into the meat of the issue because there was just like an hour dedicated to this conversation. But we did have a draft model that went up. Center of Baby Wearing Studies had just done a series of German trainings. She did the Klauvi training through the Baby Wearing Institute when Petra went down. I believe it was 2009. And then she had in 2010 Ulrika Rover from Tragerschule Dresden go to New York. I did try and get Ulrika to Canada myself, but things didn't work out. And so the model that was presented there was what I would call a traditional model that was known in the German world at the time. I know things have evolved since then, but you had your first level where you just were introduced, you had your second level, whereas afterwards you finished and you had a test and you were approved to teach, and then your third level where then you could become an instructor for other consultants. And then we kind of played around with number of hours and all this sort of information. Things went quiet after that point. I do know that in 2013, and Katie was at this conference, the first Bristol conference called the European Baby Wearing Conference. There was a casual dinner with a bunch of small industry people, and it was brought up there again. Henrik Norholt is one of the main point people for the other initiative, and I did attend the meeting in 2015 in Antwerp, and then I did go to the meeting once again in 2015 in Bristol. That initiative went silent. When I joined their group, the intention was that I would, whether it succeeded or failed, that I would proceed. A year later, in April 2016, I published the PPCP website. A number of things happened, and the fall of that year, I decided to internationalize. Now, I had a Canadian team put together, and I will introduce the members of the team once I talk about everyone who's involved in the initiative. But my attitude was, when I decided to take this globally, is that everything that we had talked about, basically threw it out the door. I quickly became aware in talking to people in other countries that I didn't quite understand their realities, and I had always intended to go global. Because of my dual citizenship, I felt that was I grew up my whole entire life, my parents saying, you can go and work in Europe. I'm like, then why did you leave? Europe was so great, why did you go to Canada? But that was always an option that I was going to explore. But I was brought to this decision, and now in retrospect, I see it as a huge positive to have, instead of created something for the Canadian market and then try to fit everyone into that model, to now have something where we create a center point. Now, when you create a center point, is it going to make everybody happy? No. But it will be more workable. It will be more global, it will be more transnational, and it will have a greater amount of validity for more people. So then we closed the first step in January of 2017. There was a whole bunch of things happening in the background. Some people were very surprised that I was able to really pull things together very quickly. But Katie knows about this. I had, after the certification talks in 2015, I created a small networking group. And out of that networking group came Katie's article on ableism that she wrote because she was motivated. Hi, come on in. It's good to see you guys. Practice on getting lost on the German train system. Oh my goodness. Yes. And then from that perspective, I'd already started having conversations with Rosa at the end of August to do a conference in Barcelona. I had already started, I created 2 working groups to do one, a research critique, and to start a second group to actually create a research study. My long-term intention in creating a professional entity, consistent training program with protocols that are reliable, was then we could start creating science. We could start creating proof. We can't create proof without consistency. You need to have something testable. And it's not to say that my method is going to be the best, or that what we create is going to be the best. But it's going to be consistent, it's going to be global, and it will be testable as a proof of concept as a result. I came to Europe then again to promote it in 2017. I came to Antwerp. In June of this year, I was invited to the Traga Symposium by the Tragetz Network, and I managed to do some outreach there. And you gotta love the Germans. I like them for so many reasons, but I was asked point blank, do you think that yours will be as good as the German schooling model? And I said no, for 2 reasons. One, it's cultural. The Germans are very precise, thoughtful, analytical people. They have the capability of breaking things down into minute steps, and that's not always appropriate for all cultures. That's not how everybody learns. Secondly, it's very limited in scope. One of the most interesting things for me was being in a ring sling session. The Germans have a preference for a gathered, shouldered ring sling, and they use it. The gold standard is the wrap, and the position that a wrap offers, they then transfer it to all other carrier types. And that's great. I loved it because if I have a mom who comes in with a gathered shoulder now, I have more tricks to help them. But in North America, we solve the slippage on the shoulders through structure. But structure isn't accepted in Germany as much. So that's a cultural interpretation that comes out in a physical product. And so those elements have to be respected as well when you're building a curriculum. And then, of course, I am here today, the 3rd time to Europe in 2017, to launch the PPCB group and to invite you all into what we are doing. So that is who I am. Baby Wearing in Canada, I have done 2 conferences. I was the first in our industry to broadcast live over the internet. My sessions from 2016 are currently available for sale on my website, and I have also been reaching out to schools to see if those sessions are of interest to them and to see what relationships we can build. I believe relationship building is important no matter where you are placed, because that is the foundation of everything. It is important in democracy to have different philosophies and to have different ways of doing things. It just is. And if you can't keep your doors open to different thoughts, then that is extremely problematic. And I will be doing a 3rd conference next year in Canada, and we will be doing the 1st conference with the PPCP group, thankfully with the help of Rosa in Spain, in Barcelona. We have several committees. I am so excited. I will talk to anybody. I really will. We have contributors representing 5 continents. 5 continents, like this. And I'm not done my outreach. I'm hoping to keep reaching out and to see, I'm waiting to hear back from a few more people. Right now I have, I believe, 12 countries represented in the team that is working with me. This is a global approach. I am a child of 3 continents. I was born in Africa.
We came to Europe. I have European citizenship, and then we went to Canada. I am Canadian. And now I've created a foundation for everyone who has a voice that feels that they need to be heard, to respect certain aspects of carrying, to come in and contribute. So, if you've had a chance to look at my website, you know that there are certain aspects that are extremely important to me. One, of course, the integrity, professional, and connection that I have mentioned already. Anatomy. We must understand anatomy and health for babies and for parents. For postpartum support, I'm very much an interdisciplinary approach sort of individual. One, from the very practical side of when a person comes in front of any one of us, in order to really support them, we can't break apart the little pieces. And if we can address something in the interim, like, a touch up on the breastfeeding technique while in a baby carrier, or, what's really bothering you? Is it because your baby won't stop crying and you're feeling self-judgment when it's just, you can't help it, you're doing fine, the baby's just a bit more sensitive, or whatever the issue happens to be. So the lactation support, and then of course the preservation of and the respect of traditional carrying techniques. One thing that is happening in science, in particular in Canada, is a realization that we have marginalized, we have dismissed, and we have ignored our Indigenous people. And they have a wealth of information that has not been captured, and that has not been validated, and that has not been given equivalent status. And that's not just for our Indigenous people. It is for all Indigenous people. And that is not to mean that there is one way for the Indigenous, and that they will all agree, and that they will all have the same point of view, or that they're even all correct. But until we bring those voices in to the creation of a carrying curriculum, we don't know what information we are missing. And as I was speaking of the German example, when it came to the ring sling, there's also an African example that I have with respects to carrying. One thing that you will find across carrying traditions is that they don't have a fixed structure in what they use to carry their infants, which is one of the reasons why Germans place wraps above all else, because it tends to be the most common carrying tool. But for example, the torso carry in Africa is typically not tied. It's twisted under, and it's twisted under. So what that means is that, one, the parent has to be actively carrying. You can't put it in a fixed structure and ignore the child. You have to have almost a meditative awareness of the child's movement on your body, so that you have a level of attentiveness that maybe we haven't been trained to in this culture. That is something that you can actually teach parents. But what is not always available in the culture, which helps them, is recently there was a study that came out in lactation, and one of the most important things for the transmission of breastfeeding, grandparents, grandmothers. You don't come from a carrying tradition, and you have Joe Blow or Jane Doe on the street. And then if you listen to Canadians on a board, that person came over to me and dared to tell me what to do. We have a culture that doesn't reward interference. Whereas if you're African and you're doing something wrong, everybody steps in, and the level of offense is much lower. I went to the International Attachment Conference in 2015, and I've always had an interest in culture. One of the sessions I attended by a graduate student basically used pictures. They had pictures drawn by children in the West and pictures drawn by children in Africa. It was a very, very concrete example. The African children, all the people were the same size. In the Western, the heads were larger, individual expression was much more defined. So individual versus community, like on a very simplistic aggregate level. So what is it that we can parse out that is cultural that we cannot rely on versus what we can teach? And so this is what we have with what I'm hoping to gain from the traditional things. So who do we have? I'm going to start with the committees. The first committee is the carrying curriculum. So in the carrying curriculum, we have, I forgot a name, sorry. And the profiles will be going up on the website over the next week or so. The carrying curriculum, you have myself, Deborah Rodriguez from Baby Wearing Canada. I also have another Canadian colleague. Her name is Andy Johnson. She's out from Calgary, Alberta. She has a business called the Offbeat Doula. She is also going to be helping us with the postpartum support, and she, I think, took the first level of the Center of Baby Wearing Studies, but she's been baby wearing either as long or longer than I have. Then from South America, we have Valeria Calderon. She has a business called IU Baby, and she's also opening the co-owner of the FTZ school in Colombia. Valeria and I, we met in 2012 at the Washington Conference. We have Mari Lara Sjalik, who is from Norway. She was also at the 2012 conference. We kind of crossed paths, but we didn't meet properly until this year. Her eldest is like 18 or 19 years of age, and she's been carrying for a long time there. We have Adebisi Osendaku. She is the owner of Joy and Joe in the United Kingdom. She is originally from Nigeria and is of the Yoruba people. And she, as a West African, will be bringing her knowledge of her traditions into the curriculum itself. And I also have someone from Malaysia, but I don't have her full profile yet. As soon as I do, I will put it up. Like BC, who is in the United Kingdom, the Malaysian I have is living in the United States. It is much easier for me to do outreach to certain communities, especially if they have English as a second language. I am still looking, and I am still doing a lot more outreach for the carrying curriculum. In particular, we have a West African. If I could get an East African, that would be great. I don't want one person with experience in South Asia. We're looking for Filipino. We're looking, I've got some tentacles out in the Japanese, Korean, and Chinese traditions. I'm just waiting to see what comes back to me. For anatomy, we have a Canadian there as well. So my Canadian team was Andy Johnson, Karen Hughes, and Celine Willett. So Karen Hughes is a registered massage therapist in Canada. In my province, they are under the Health Act. They take 3 years of college, and Karen teaches anatomy at the local college, and she's the owner of 3 clinics. We have Swancha, who is from Germany and trained as a nurse. Would you like to wave to everybody? And I'll just turn this around so you guys can see her. I don't know if it'll show up. I'm terrible with the camera. There she is. And she has, would you like to talk a bit about yourself? It feels weird.
You are allowed to.
Oh. So she's trained as a nurse in Germany and has been working in that capacity since the 90s, and then has taken several baby wearing instruction courses, and recently was authorized to be a Klauvi instructor, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, so Gebietsbetreuer. So it's just I kind of am allowed to teach my colleagues.
Okay.
But I don't teach new people.
Okay.
Instructors.
Perfect. And then the chair of this committee is from Poland. I will be meeting with her next week and getting her profile. So I'm sorry I don't have anything. I like people to sign my papers before I announce that they're part of my group. Everyone who takes part of the initiative is required to sign a confidentiality clause. One of the things that I ran into, particularly with the 2015 certification discussions, but is endemic in any educational initiative, is trust between colleagues and recognition. The purpose of knowledge is that it eventually becomes part of the public domain. But you need to trust who you're working with in order to create something strong. For the lactation committee, Rosa is the chair. She's an IBCLC. And one of the things with a conflict of interest, and I have a great respect for Rosa, because when she came to me, she said, I am not designing any part of the carrying curriculum. And I said, okay, because this is the politics. Rosa is a retailer and distributor. We don't want anyone to say that she favored her brands. We do have, like with BC, because she's the owner of Joy and Joy, and Valeria, who has IU Babies, some crossover, but we make it very obvious what those crossovers are, and we will create the voting, the final voting, so that it's balanced. So that's for the lactation. We also have Gillian O'Neill, who is from Ireland. Gillian is both new to baby carrying and not new to baby carrying. Gillian's the eldest of 4. So she's been carrying, I believe, since 16 years of age. She first carried her youngest brother in a padded ring sling. And then she came to it again more recently. Her eldest is about 2.5. She's also trained as a lactation supporter through Breastfeeding Ireland. And she is a volunteer with Baby Wearing Ireland. Her business is called Mommy Hob, and she will be helping us with the lactation support. And the postpartum support has, we don't have a chair for that yet, but we have 2 members. Celine Ouellette is Canadian. She is a social worker. She works with the Children's Aid Society, which is our children's protective services. That's the American term, right? Child Protective Services, yeah. And she is also very, very important for our birth community in my region. She works with Mothers of Change, and they've been holding the Ottawa Hospital's feet to the fire to respect informed choice, and also to push for the allowance of breech birth per the guidelines of the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada. The last committee, which has me really excited, like I'm like a kid with candy. So one of the things that I've talked about is over and over again is professionalism. So when we're looking at creating a profession, you have a standard curriculum. And the curriculum, I've just outlined it: carrying, anatomy, perinatal / postpartum, lactation. But it also can't be based on wishes and dreams. We have a lot of theory and no concrete fact. And it's okay that we're starting with theory and that we're using interdisciplinary studies to try and create a basis and a hypothesis. But the whole point of this is to challenge it. And so when you create a curriculum, you have to use the best information available. And this is information that's gained through scientific research. So we're creating a profession so that we can start looking at what kind of data we can collect, what kind of data exists, what is the parity of public health data across countries and jurisdictions, so that then we can start creating critiques and creating studies. There is very, very little carrying research. We are all very aware of this here, and some of it that exists is extremely weak. and has its biases. So interdisciplinary, of course, attachment psychology, kangaroo care, perinatal studies, musculoskeletal physiological information, motor learning, the list goes on and on. The chair, I'm going to have to read from the website because it's a lot of information. I just will be putting up her profile. Viral the Winter. Oh, is it going to let me? Katie, do you mind pulling up the joint conversation on your phone? I'm just not sure if it's going to let me bring it up here without it crashing Facebook Live.
Okay.
So Viral has worked at the University of Leuven since 2009 in STEM education. Her focus has been from 2 years and up. She has, when she sent me her research, the list of research and reports that she's been involved in, I was like, you did not just volunteer for me.
Do you need her link? What is it you need?
Yeah, her link, if that would be great. Because I know that I sent it to you in the joint conversation for you guys to review. She has a Master's of Education, I believe, and is clearly from Belgium. Ah, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to read this verbatim. Viral came to baby carrying, as most of us do, through her children. A month after the birth of her son, who is now 2, her friend invited her to a workshop to learn about the ruck. This sparked a fascination with all things baby carrying, leading her to attend the first Flemish baby wearing conference, and encouraged her to train at the Institute Voorlichting to become an instructor. Influenced by her experience as a researcher, the subsequent birth of her twin girls, and inspired by her attendance at both of the Flemish conferences, her interests are currently focused on back-carrying infants, the hows and whys of different teachings across borders, and the science behind baby carrying. She is a researcher and has worked at the Center for Experiential Education at the University of Leuven with a background in pedagogic sciences. Her focus has been STEM education and the mental processes of children while they are learning about and exploring the physical world. We welcome her. She's the chair of the committee. So she got her Master's in Educational Sciences in 2007, worked from 2009 to 2016 as a researcher in educational sciences at the university. And then she herself got trained for baby carrying just this year. And then there's going to be a whole list of the papers that she has been involved in. And there's 2 things I love about our initiative. I find too often that we wait for the perfect set of circumstances and for people with the perfect qualifications and everything to fall into place. And when she came to me and I said, would you like to volunteer? She said, well, I don't have a PhD. I don't think I'm really hot potatoes. I'm like, I don't care. You know what research is. You know how to pull together information. You know how to group it and how to parse it out and how to look at the details. That's all we need. If we waited for a big name to buy into this concept, we could be here for years. Most of the work in this world are done by people like you and I. I went to Catholic school for years, and there is a saying in Christianity that says the meek shall inherit the earth. And that tends to apply, after death. And when I take my kids to these small little festivals, and they've got to listen to the boring person, and perhaps today I am the boring person, talking at the front of the room. That person has done such a huge difference in their community. And they look just like you and I. We are the meek, and we're going to build as best we can, with as much integrity as we can, and with the energy that we have to do it in. And we will learn lessons along the way. but we're going to start and we're just going to plain do it. And as we move along and as we create, like with the Research and Science Committee, it will be absolutely fantastic. And just to give you a sense of what I mean by research and science, I'm just going to go down to the menu and look it up. Now, the second person I have involved with the research committee is this quiet little woman here, Katie Nicolai. She put her education on hold when she became a mother, and I first met Katie because she did the Baby Wearing Research Review presentation at the International Baby Wearing Conference in Washington, D.C. Katie has an incredibly incisive, analytical mind. That Germany stole her is absolutely no surprise to me. She has a bachelor's of sciences and a bachelor's of
science and agriculture.
My brain keeps switching those two letters around in my fatigue at the moment. And she has a particular interest in ecology, and her, as you know from writing, perhaps if you read her article on ableism in baby carrying, her third child was born with Down syndrome, and so she has a particular interest in how disability intersects with things like child attachment and all of the other interdisciplinary things that I mentioned earlier today. She is going to be completing her master's. Yes, and that this will be a great place to bring people who are interested in creating baby wearing research at whatever level. And we will be doing outreach, letting people know that we exist, letting people know that, the different ways that we hope to encourage research. We are small. I don't know if you guys are aware of my personal circumstances. As I mentioned, in 2014, I got divorced. I'm a single mother with shared custody. I have another job, like a lot of us in baby wearing. A lot of us in baby wearing either have a spouse or a spouse and a job. I am the National Training Coordinator and Help Desk Officer for ACE software. I have been training people professionally since 2008 in the work environment. And because the software we use is a case management software, I have always had a very high interest in data. You can't do anything without data. I'm very good at creating ideas too. I'm fantastic at them. My sarcasm is also out of this world. Is that the rain?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good God. I think I locked myself out of your phone. I'm stellar. So I'll just take a quick read of the research and how we're going to approach it. Clearly, I can't fund anything. We're all volunteer driven. Can I just see the page again? Because I just want to read a couple of the paragraphs, if that's all right. And then after this, I'll just go into, blah, 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 blah. I write so well. So the goal is to provide a consistent approach to improve the application of existing techniques, to establish a protocol for developing and field testing new carrying techniques with the goal of providing safe and reliable carrying support to improve outcomes for babies and parents. Studies will involve creating partnerships across the carrying industry. I wish we were like lactation. I will always need an object to carry a child because we're not marsupials. It'd be so much easier, Aileen, eh? Certifying nothing, it's all available. So our first steps as a small organization, and this is why research is such an important foundation of every single aspect of the rest of our curriculum, is what research is there to support what we're claiming. Summarize and understand all or as much relevant information from related fields. Secondly, we will foster an open environment where researchers can connect with other like-minded individuals. So this is because another research, like the two of them, Katie and Viral, started talking, do you prefer quantitative or qualitative? And at a certain point I'm like, oh God, you're giving me a headache. And I'm like, part of me is going, this is so cool. And the other part of me is like, I don't know what they're saying. And that's important, is to be able to bounce ideas off of people and also to facilitate, because if you have a piece of the puzzle here in one country and in another, the studies that are more likely to get funding have more than one institution involved or have more than one person involved. And it's very rare to find studies with just one author once you're getting past your master's and PhD. So that is the start of the goal of the research. As some of you are aware, and as I mentioned earlier, we actually started talking about a Spanish conference long before I decided to globalize my concept. It was shortly after the International Baby Wearing Conference in Atlanta with Rosa and I, and it involved Elena and a few others. The reason I chose Spain is because I could sort of see in the wind that English speakers have an advantage, and we frequently don't go to countries where English isn't the first language, and that there have been incredible developments in the Spanish and Hispanic world. And then it became far more relevant to me after. One, because Rosa, as soon as she found out that I was internationalizing, she was the very first person who said, where are you going? I'm following. And I'm like, okay, I guess I better know what I'm doing. But of course, I've always had a very strong idea. So the interim agenda, as it is right now, I have Noemi Hervada Palu, who is the director of the Azores de Portello, who's going to be doing a professional communication in baby wearing. Noemi has one of the largest YouTube channels in Spain, and so she's going to outline how she grew that. Mercedes Granada, director and trainer of Azores Continuum. She is going to be doing a presentation on hip dysplasia and baby carrying. She has a particular interest because her daughter, was it her daughter who had hip dysplasia? Yes. Elena Lopez, the Monitos y Risas, and also has a retail called Hola Luna, will be doing 2 presentations. Her first presentation would be basic techniques in wrapping. Rosa is, Elena has also been working on a book that she's co-authored sections of it with Valeria. And she's just trying to translate it for Central and South American Spanish because it's slightly different dialect, and we'll be doing a keystone presentation based off of one of the chapters of her book. Lorena Gutierrez Fernandez has a business called Fisioterapia para Bebés y Mamás. She is a physiotherapist. She has written a book called Bebés en Movimiento, Acompañamiento del Desarrollo Psicomotor, Sensorial y Postural de tu Bebé. She co-wrote that with Maria del Mar Sanchez Gonzalez. I apologize for my accent. I'm saying everything like it's Portuguese. I apologize. Her course has been approved by the Spanish Physiotherapy Association for officially training physiotherapists. She's going to be doing a presentation on baby carrying and baby development. Beatriz Moreno Montilla from Cangueralta Escuela has quite a good community of support. She has 3,600 people on her Facebook group, although she's trained just slightly over 100. So to extrapolate 100 to 3,600 is phenomenal, and she will be doing some wrapping training. We have Rosa, who will be doing breastfeeding presentation. Vero will be doing a presentation on important elements to consider when creating a study. And we're going to be actually having an hands-on session. If you want to create a study, what are your ideas? Where would you go? What can you do? Other sessions include M position, looking beyond to serve clients better, possibilities, how associations increase professionalism, the importance of healthy manufacturing, and more. This would have been the agenda that would have been presented to you, but it's now going to be for 2018. I'm just going to quickly, I think I've gone through everything. Yeah, I've gone through everything on the agenda. I'd like to thank you all for coming out, because I know it's a long day coming from the fair, and some of you came down just specifically for this presentation from various parts of Germany. I appreciate it. Do you have any questions? Are there any questions?
No, but I'm excited.
So Swansha just said that she has no questions, but she is excited. Yay! I'm excited too. I don't know if I'll be able to have another open meeting before then. The next one will be at my 2018 conference with Baby Wearing in Canada at the end of May. If it's at all possible to have one sooner, I will. My intention and the intention of the group is to keep connecting with the community and to keep doing outreach. It's not to have a secret little group where nobody knows what's happening. It's not in my personality set, and I find that it's really hard to then engage in collecting information if you don't tell people that you exist and you don't tell people what you're hoping to connect with. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Yes?
What do you want or need from the manufacturing side of the industry? It sounds like you have a few retailers and distributors, and
Yes.
a few of those are involved as well. But I know we're trying to sidestep conflict. How do you see this?
So I've actually had this conversation.
Could you repeat the question? I don't think that you're going to pick it up on that.
Oh, yes, you're right. So Lene Catalan from the Baby Carrying Industry Alliance, BCIA, just asked, how do I view the interaction with an education certification with product and manufacturing? From the very beginning, I actually have a section on the PPCP group website about manufacturers, and the reality is, as particularly when we get to a greater degree of structure in baby carriers, that design becomes critical. So we will be able to create general rules about what we expect. You pick up one structured carrier, once you have enough time in the industry, you can basically figure it out without a manual. But the reality is that, for example, with stretchy wraps, a high level of elastane or spandex reduces the amount of time that you can use it. So when it comes to things like intricate fabric combinations and interlock knitting techniques, and I'm a knitter, they go way over my head after a while, and then we will have an open process for comment on aspects of the curriculum for manufacturers that do want to give input. We also have a huge interest, and I know Swansha and I talked about this in depth in the spring, in carrier evaluation and feedback. So how do I describe this? With my special needs clients, sometimes I have to go and create an ad hoc solution. In some jurisdictions in the United States, that's now going to be illegal. You will, because it won't be ASTM certified, if you want to go and modify a carrier and take it to a seamstress, it may, for liability, be problematic. I'm not sure how that all is going to be interpreted once the standard becomes mandatory. That's, I guess, a wait and see.
No, it won't ever be illegal. You're voiding any kind of warranty.
Yes.
Right. Once you buy something, if you want to do whatever you want to it, that's, absolutely nobody can stop you from doing that. I would caution educators about doing that themselves.
Yes.
You can suggest these sorts of things. I don't know that I would want to get in the middle of that, but...
Yeah, whereas in Canada, I have designed baby carrying solutions and handed them off to a seamstress because it's different. And so part of it will be respecting the jurisdictional requirements of each country. But also, if we find that there is a solution that is fairly easy to implement, but of course we're not manufacturers, that's a perfect time to have a discussion with manufacturers. Another time would be, I know Swansha has been involved in improving instructions for the European market. That's another instance where it would be a point of contact, because it was cultural and also
Yes.
technical.
Yes, because the American way of doing it wasn't the way we do it in Germany. So we have more exact, more, yeah, so we have some more points of, where we can for.
Yeah, so what Swansha was saying, that with the work that she's done in editing instructions, is that sometimes you do have to take cultural considerations and cultural interpretation of instructions into account. And although the carrier's functionality remains the same, the way that a person interprets instructions changes. I was having a discussion about pictographs this week with somebody, and I brought up the example that, you know, as Canadians, Lene, you and I know that it's a leaf. But cultures who don't know our trees think it's two people talking. Right? So then that has to be something that comes into account too. So the contact point for manufacturers, I think I've outlined it as 3. One is for esoteric aspects such as knit and fiber, and how that has an impact on and wear and durability, or even, you know, this knit you can back wear with because it'll keep structure and shape, and this one won't, and why that is. 2, it's feedback. They have an expertise in their particular carrier. Is there something that we've designed in the general curriculum which then we have to make an exception for? Because perhaps there's only like 5 structured carriers sold in that particular market, and in Europe, the features on a structured carrier, just there's so many more than North America, for example. It's just starting to hit the market in Canada. Yeah, they have a lot more lateral adjustability and horizontal adjustability. It's insane. And then, you know, for specialty situations, you know, how does the liability come into account there for us as educators, for the manufacturers? Is there something that we see as a need where we can evaluate a carrier and give feedback, and so on and so forth? I'm trying to think. I repeated myself. Yeah, okay. I apologize. I'm working on a 6-hour time lag, and so sometimes I need to remind myself what I just said. Do you have any other questions? No? Stephanie, anyone else have any additional questions? I apologize for the quality of the video on Facebook. Like I said, I will be putting the audio up on to Google Drive, and I will be available to answer questions at any point in time. If you are interested in the work that we're doing, please just send an email. I won't be taking any additional applications until November, realistically, but please reach out, say why it interests you, what your areas of expertise are, how you'd like to contribute. We are looking for people in different countries or different traditions. Yes, Rosa?
Even if they don't speak English, I mean, if they speak Spanish or French or German?
So if you don't speak English, what we are looking at, for example, in some of the carrying traditions, is to have someone who then goes and interviews and brings the information back. But you do need to have someone who can communicate in English. English is the international language. And so I know at one point we were talking about a committee, like you could have a country committee and then the person with English would then come with the full summary of information to the general group. And I know, like, not everyone speaks English.
It might be a good idea to list languages for all of the participants that are in committees for contributors.
Yes.
To directly.
I do.
them.
We have a lot of languages.
Yes, we do.
We have, oh my goodness, I can't even. So I've got English, French, minor amounts of Portuguese. Rosa, you speak Portuguese as well? Speaks a bit. She understands Portuguese. Most Spanish people don't understand Portuguese. She has Spanish, English, French as well, Catalan, which is its own language. Swansha has English, German.
And all the others are so small.
They're weak. Katie has German and English. Mari Laura has all the Scandinavian languages as well as English. Valeria has Spanish and English.
Don't try to list them all here.
Yeah, I will. I'm like, I should have like your fingerprints memorized or something. I'm quite sure. There's only 14 of you, really.
Fingerprint is old school. We learned 2 days ago, the face is the most important thing in the future. So.
Is it?
Yeah, you didn't see the new iPhone X?
I can't afford Apple.
I'm sorry.
Anyhow, thank you everyone for listening in. We'll get this to you as soon as possible. If you have any additional questions, do let me know. And we look forward to letting you know about our future work. Thanks a lot.